Good morning. I'm Savannah Sowers. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Stephen Romo in for Joe today. And let's get right to that team coverage on the death of Pope Francis, including new details about his funeral and what comes next for the Catholic Church. And we begin with NBC News International correspondent Claudio Lavanga joining us now from Vatican City with more on this. Claudio, good morning to you. So these new details are slowly starting to come out about the Pope's funeral. What have we learned about those plans?
Steve, Savannah, good morning. Well, that's absolutely right. In the last couple of hours, the Vatican laid out the plan for the next few days. Tomorrow morning, they say that the Pope Francis's coffin, which is right now in the chapel of Santa Marta, that is the residence where he's been residing in since day one of his pontificate inside the Vatican, is going to be moved through a procession at 9 o'clock in the morning, Rome time, through St. Peter's Square and then inside St. Peter's Basilica. After that, the pilgrims will be able to start lining up to pay their last respects for at least a couple of days, at least until Friday evening, because then on Saturday morning, as you mentioned, the funeral will take place in St. Peter's Square at about 10 in the morning. That is 2 o'clock at night, 2 a.m. in Easter time. Now, we already know that Donald Trump has already announced that he will participate with Melania. We already had confirmation that the Ukrainian President Zelensky and the First Lady will also participate alongside, I'm sure, many other world leaders, because this was a pope that was not only loved by the faithful, he was also respected by leaders around the world. And then, of course, the cardinals will have to decide the date of the conclave, which will take place at some stage between the 5th and the 10th of May. Savannah, Stephen?
Claudio, you know, the Pope, he had obviously been hospitalized. He had been quite sick for a period of time just recently. But then, you know, he was seen in public on Easter Sunday. He chose to kind of make that surprise route where he rode the Pope mobile. He gave these Easter greetings to thousands of people there at the Vatican. So it has been a little bit of a surprise to some people. What do we know about the Pope's death, about what ultimately happened Sunday night, Monday morning?
Yeah, absolutely, Savannah. I was here on Sunday covering Easter Mass, and I was also surprised to see him getting on that Pope mobile and cheering the crowd and greeting the crowds here. They were all ecstatic. They couldn't believe that not only they were seeing him, they were seeing him getting on a Pope mobile, something he hasn't done since he left hospital more than a month ago. So everybody thought that he was getting better. He was on the way to full recovery. And then the shocking news less than 24 hours later that he died. Now, last night, the Vatican has announced the official cause of death. They said that he suffered a stroke that then led to a coma and then to an irreversible heart failure. Now, they did mention, of course, that he was suffering from complications from that bilateral pneumonia. But the official cause of death, Savannah, is a stroke and then an irreversible heart failure.
And Claudio, the death of a pope, it sets off a series of rituals and traditions, not just having to do with the funeral you mentioned, but also in the process of selecting a new pope. So much goes into this. Walk us through some of what will happen next.
Yeah, absolutely. Between the 5th and the 10th of May, the conclave will take place. Now, this is one of the longest running medieval, almost and secretive rites from the Catholic Church and in any institutions around the world. Everything is laid out very clearly. And on the first day of the conclave, the cardinals electors, who are the cardinals who are 80 or younger, that's 135 of them right now from all over the world, they will go inside the Sistine Chapel. The doors will lock, and then they will be essentially they will not have any access to the outside world, not to be influenced by the media, by the people, and then they will have to decide by taking a vote, 2 votes a day, who they think should become the next pontiff. Now, for someone to be elected pontiff, they should reach a 2/3 majority plus 1. Now, if it's a no vote, then you will see from a chimney that is going to be temporarily placed on the top of the Sistine Chapel, black smoke. If they choose a pope, then we will see, of course, white smoke. Well, as I like to say, black smoke, nope. White smoke, pope. Savannah, Stephen.
Very easy to remember that way. Yeah, for sure. Claudio, thanks so much.
Thank you, Claudio. Great reporting since this has all happened. Well, for more on what's next for the church, let's bring in Bill Kavanaugh. He is a professor of Catholic Studies and director of the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology at DePaul University. Bill, good morning. Thanks very much for joining us. So there's been a lot of talk about Pope Francis's style, right? He was far more progressive than his predecessor, Pope Benedict. But give us some specifics here. Tell us about how his papacy differed from those before him.
Well, in one way, I think you could say that while Pope Benedict XVI emphasized clarity, Pope Francis emphasized charity. So rather than Pope Benedict thought a lot about relativism and the lack of a sense of truth in the modern era, and thought that was the main problem, was getting clear on the doctrine. And Pope Francis, in some ways, although he doesn't really deviate from the doctrine very much from Benedict XVI, I think he thought that you've got to touch the heart before you can touch the mind. And so charity is the kind of love that he showed, I think, is really his emphasis. You've got to get back to the basics and touch people's hearts before you can get down to the issues of doctrine.
It's fascinating hearing all of the people around the Pope who've come out and spoken about him. Cardinal Michael Czerny was a close aide to the Pope. This is some of what he had to say about the Pope's work.
I hope that the dialogues will continue because he opened new frontiers of dialogue, and he based them mostly on real relationships, not just on exchange of ideas or exchange of policies. And so hopefully these bonds will continue and perdure, and we will learn to live together as brothers and sisters.
So, Bill, a lot of people are looking at this. Where do you think the cardinals will go from here? Will they follow Francis's more progressive vision for the church, or will we see a return to more traditionalists when they choose a new pope?
Well, I think this conclave in some ways is particularly difficult to handicap in advance. In 2005, Cardinal Ratzinger was the clear front runner, and he came out as Benedict XVI. But it doesn't seem like there is a clear front runner here. And you would think that because more than 80% of the voting cardinals were named by Pope Francis, you would think that there would be a kind of continuity. But there are several things that make it difficult to predict. One is that the cardinals really don't know each other. He's picked so many cardinals from peripheral areas, Mongolia and Central African Republic and so on, that have not spent a lot of time in the Vatican, so they don't really know each other, and usually they pick a pope from amidst the College of Cardinals. And they're also not neatly divided into camps. I mean, I think people tend to think about these matters in terms of, Republicans versus Democrats or something like that, progressives versus conservatives. And you pretty much could have predicted that the Republicans were not going to elect Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker of the House again. But it doesn't work that way in the Catholic Church. They're not divided neatly into conservatives and progressives. But some cardinals might be very conservative on issues of sex and gender, but very what we would call liberal on issues of war and peace and church governance and economics and things like that. And so it's really hard to predict where exactly this is going to go.
Professor, with that in mind and the fact you say there's not a clear frontrunner, are there some top contenders you could familiarize us with to replace him?
Sure. There are names that are floated, and I think some of the more intriguing names are those of places in the global south. So, as you know, the center of gravity of the church has shifted over the last century from the global north to the global south. And so Pope Francis was the first pope from the global south, Latin America. And a lot of people think that the next contender could come from a different region of the global south. So you've got Cardinal Turkson, for example, from Ghana, who has had some leading roles in the Vatican. He helped Pope Francis write the encyclical on the environment, Laudato Si. You've got Cardinal Tagle from the Philippines, who's often been called the Asian Francis, because his style is very humble and he's very close to the poor. And so that's another possibility. It's always possible, of course, that people could think, well, it's time to right the ship and we need to go back to Italian popes like we had for for centuries. And so there are contenders like Cardinal Zuppi of Bologna, who is very much like Pope Francis, living very modestly and very close to the people.
Bill Kavanaugh, fascinating conversation. We appreciate your time and your expertise this morning. Thanks for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Some financial news to get to now. U.S. stocks suffered a rough start to the week, and that comes after President Trump renewed his attacks on Fed Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, raising questions about the central bank's independence.
Yeah, investors also continue to be weighed down by concerns over the president's tariffs, of course, amid fears the trade war could lead to a global economic downturn. As you can see here on your screen right now, all three major U.S. markets ended the day down more than 2%.
NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung joins us now with more on this. Brian, good to have you with us to help us understand all this. So what did we see in the markets yesterday, and what are we seeing shaping up for today?
Yeah, it was another sell-off, which just underscores just how volatile these markets remain after we had those concerns about the tariff talks, and obviously that introducing a lot of uncertainty for investors that don't know what the tariff policies are going to be in the next few days or even weeks. But you also have that compounded now with the concerns that the economic steward in the form of Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell may be under the hot seat here with, the president now hammering his policies and criticizing the Federal Reserve not lowering interest rates through a number of Truth Social posts, most recently, which came yesterday in the morning, where he described the Fed chair as someone who is too late. He described him as a major loser. Again, this is someone that I want to remind people is someone that the president had nominated in his first term to lead the central bank. You can see that long Truth Social post ahead of there, clearly not happy with the fact that he didn't lower interest rates in their last meeting. But again, the question here is, does this put the Federal Reserve in a tough bind? If they lower interest rates, that can make inflation worse.
And explain the importance of the central bank having independence and why this type of scrutiny from the president could freak the markets out.
Yeah, well, you think about the economy, basically there are two keys that, different bodies have the ability to kind of unlock when it comes to steering what the economy does. The first is the fiscal agents, or what you call the White House and Congress. They pass policies, they pass certain laws that can stimulate or even pull back on an economic, growth. But when it comes to the Federal Reserve, they have their own key, which is interest rates, to kind of steer, okay, well, based off of what these borrowing costs are, we can also slow or quicken the economy. Now, the reason for why the Federal Reserve structure gives it a certain level of independence is because you don't want to worry about a president that's going to pressure the Federal Reserve chairman into doing certain things with interest rates and fixing their policies to align with what they're doing, because that could really lead to a lot of consolidation over controlling the entire economy. So I think that with the Federal Reserve, they are independent. There is questions about whether or not the president can fire the Fed chair, as he has suggested he might be interested in doing. That would likely have to go to the Supreme Court, even though there have been some recent Supreme Court rulings where they maybe have suggested that even the president can fire independent directors, even at independent agencies. We'll have to see.
Something to watch. The two keys analogy, that really helps understand it. I like that. I have not heard that. In the background of all of this, we also have the trade tensions that are ongoing between China and the United States. Has there been any progress there? Anything to show for the tariff troubles that we've been seeing?
Well, there have been conversations. So J.D. Vance in India having conversations with several high-level officials there. And then there are also plans this week in Washington, I believe, for South Korean officials to have conversations with the Americans as well. So, yes, there are conversations being had with these countries that the United States has said they want to unilaterally negotiate these trade deals with. But the problem is that we haven't seen any sort of market progress in terms of anything on paper. There have been no agreements. There have been no trade deals, even though we have been, a few days into these tariff talks. So we'll have to see.
Brian Chung, thank you very much. Two keys. Love it. Let's bring in NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez for more on this. Hi, Gabe. Good morning. So let's start where Brian just left off, this concern over tariffs, of course. President Trump did meet yesterday in the Oval Office at the White House, with several retail CEOs. What can you tell us about that meeting? These are the people, these are the companies where they're going to start feeling these prices, then pass it on to the consumer or not. What are they telling the president?
Hey there, Savannah. Good morning. Yeah, the president meeting with those top CEOs. This meeting was not on his public schedule, but there were CEOs from Walmart, Target, and Home Depot. And one source told CNBC that a representative from Lowe's was supposed to be there, but for some reason was not in attendance. But those three CEOs released pretty much identical statements saying saying that they had a productive meeting with the president and plan to continue talking here. But this is hugely significant for those retail giants, Savannah, because their business model is essentially very import heavy. So, of course, these tariffs could have big implications for their businesses, which really has a ripple effect across the economy, Savannah.
And Gabe, got to ask you about Pete Hegseth. President Trump again standing behind the defense secretary in light of the new information which we reported on yesterday that he allegedly used that personal phone to send information about U.S. military operations in Yemen. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, and two sources familiar with the matter say that there were family members on that chat. There was his wife as well as his brother and personal lawyer, who both of them work at the Pentagon. But certainly you'd expect Democrats to come out and call for his resignation. But overnight, we saw the first Republican to do so, Congressman Don Bacon of Nebraska, basically saying, I find it unacceptable. I wouldn't tolerate it if I was in charge. And he also added he's acting like he's above the law, and it shows that he's an amateur person. However, President Trump yesterday was asked about this at the Easter egg roll at the White House. Here was his response.
He is doing a great job.
Why do you still have confidence?
Because he's doing a great job. Ask the Houthis how he's doing. Ask the Houthis how much this function has. There's none. Pete's doing a great job. Everybody's happy with him.
And Secretary Hegseth himself was asked about this at that Easter egg roll as well, and he says he and the president are on the same page, Stephen and Savannah.
Yeah, gave quite a defiant response there when he was asked. Gabe, if we could switch gears just before we let you go, this is something a lot of people might be interested in. First time in 5 years, the Department of Education says it's resuming involuntary repayment of federal student loans that are in default. That stopped back in 2020 because of the COVID pandemic, but obviously there's been a lot of talk about student loan repayment between the two administrations that we've seen, the Biden administration and now the Trump administration. What do we know here?
Yeah, and this could be hugely significant for millions of Americans. The Education Department estimates more than 5 million Americans are in default of their student loans. That number could rise to about 10 million over the next couple of months. But yes, as you said, back during the pandemic, those collection of student loans was paused. Now the Education Department says that collection will begin through the Treasury Department's offset program, and that could mean wages could be garnished after a 30-day warning. Again, this is hugely significant. The Trump administration trying to make it so that, as they call it, the education secretary says American taxpayers will no longer be forced to serve as collateral for irresponsible student loan policies. Savannah and Stephen.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you very much.
Well, Harvard University is going on the offense in its battle with President Trump. The Ivy League school suing the administration in response to the government freezing more than $2 billion in federal grants.
In a statement, Harvard's president, that's Alan Garber, he accused the Trump administration of making illegal demands and attempting to exert unprecedented control over the school. He warned of the, quote, the consequences of the government's overreach will be severe and long-lasting. The complaint accuses the government of violating the First Amendment and asks a federal judge to declare President Trump's freeze order unconstitutional. The freeze was announced last week after Harvard rejected a list of demands which the Trump administration says are aimed at addressing anti-Semitism on campus.
NBC News legal analyst Angela Sinadella is here to help us break all of this down. Angela, thanks for being here. So the Trump administration also has cases going on in a similar situation with Princeton and Columbia. What does Harvard say is happening here, and how is the administration framing it?
So Harvard received this list of demands from the government, and they were sweeping these reforms and changes that were required by the government at every level, from governance to leadership, hiring, admissions practices, the elimination of DEI, having viewpoint diversity across every field, across every department at the university. So thus a change in faculty hiring practices, also a change in international admissions practices, saying that students who represented any viewpoint that might be hostile to American values could not be admitted, et cetera. So a lot of these changes. Now, obviously, though, the government here is saying that their goal here is just to limit anti-Semitism, to stop it, to prevent it. But the sweeping changes that they are asking for really go far beyond that.
So I mentioned a moment ago in this lawsuit, Harvard saying that it's a violation of the First Amendment. Walk us through their legal case and how strong do you think it is?
Look, it's pretty strong. So they are saying that they are a private university, which means they are a private actor, which means that the government can't direct their speech, can't tell them what sorts of ideology that they have to include or not include. And so this is the heart of the First Amendment. They also say being a university, being a place where discourse is encouraged, that makes it even more of an alleged violation. Now, the second thing, though, that they're really arguing here, though, is a violation of process. And we're seeing this across all the lawsuits that are being given to against the administration right now, that they had rights to be heard, to have a hearing before this funding was taken from them. And again, we've heard that in immigration, we've heard that in DOJ layoffs, et cetera, that the government is maybe taking money away without following the process that they are really allowed to under law.
It'll be fascinating to see how this plays out. Harvard saying that these actions from the administration would affect research in many areas, medicine, science, technology. From a legal perspective, how do you think the case is shaping up to remove Harvard's tax-exempt status?
Okay, so the IRS traditionally has a lot of discretion to take away this status when they want to, and they have in the past, for example, with Bob Jones University, when they were banning interracial relationships on campus. But at that point, the Supreme Court said because that was against national public policy, that was okay. I think we're going to see this go all the way up to the Supreme Court. And I think that judges are going to say some of these demands are okay, others are unconstitutional, and it's going to be a battle to define what those parameters are.
Wow.
A lot of implications there. All right, Angela Sindel, thanks so much.
Thanks, Angela. Good to see you. Well, the gunman who killed 23 people in a mass shooting at an El Paso Walmart more than 5 years ago is now pleading guilty to state charges of capital murder. Patrick Crucius admitted to targeting Hispanic shoppers when he opened fire in 2019 in what became one of the deadliest mass shootings in history. He officially changed his plea after prosecutors took the death penalty off the table. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole and already faces 90 consecutive life terms after pleading guilty to federal hate crime and weapons charges. The prosecutor's decision to decline to seek the death penalty came because a majority of the victims' families want the case to be over, many of whom were at the hearing yesterday.
All right, time now for a look at your morning news now weather. We're still tracking some severe storms across Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas today.
We've got Angie Lastman in studio with us. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. We've got a bit of an active kind of afternoon that'll set up in a small part of the country, but we've got still some thunderstorms happening already early this morning across parts of the upper Midwest. Notice parts of the southeast and stretching up into the northeast, we still have some lingering showers. The good news, out west, things are quiet. Most of us are waking up quiet across parts of the southwest, or parts of the south, rather, and that's going to stay that way for a little while longer before we really start to see this Gulf moisture kind of ramp up and the potential for some stronger storms to develop as the day goes on. Here's the area that we're watching, stretching from basically northern Kansas all the way down to parts of the border of Texas. We'll likely see some of these supercells developing with this, and that means large hail. We could see some strong winds. Tornadoes will be isolated, but still the potential will be there. And of course, some of that rain. Be mindful, though, that we'll have the potential, too, across parts of Louisiana, which saw an ample amount of rain yesterday. So the concern for flooding will be there. Here's where we go tomorrow. Still some severe storms, a much smaller area that we're going to look at, still parts of Texas, but now a sliver of New Mexico involved in that as well. And the timing of this looks to be later into the day. So we're talking late afternoon, early evening, the potential for some of those thunderstorms to fire up, hail, winds, still the potential there. Now, we do have that flood threat. This is a look at today. It's not all that impressive as far as where our rainfall amounts will land for today, but because we had so much rain yesterday across this region, it's not going to be hard for us to see the potential for some of that flooding once again in the New Orleans area, specifically stretching back to Lafayette as well. So parts of southern Louisiana included in this. And we could see some spots that pick up maybe an inch or two of rain in an hour. So those rainfall rates will be quite impressive. Big picture look, I think maybe an inch to 2 inches for more widespread areas, but still the potential is there for parts of Louisiana to pick up upwards of 5 inches in some of these locations. And that's going to be, of course, the concern for the flooding through the day today and even tomorrow. As far as our temperatures go, I think a lot of people are happy with this. Anyone that has been waiting for spring across parts of the east, well, it has arrived in some spots temperature-wise. Upper 70s for St. Louis today, low 80s for our friends in Wichita. We've got the mid 80s for Dallas, and even along the East Coast, upper upper 70s for New York City. We're running above normal for this time of year, and we're going to keep that going into tomorrow, too. 70s from Philadelphia to Roanoke, Columbus, even Milwaukee into the low 60s. Not a bad day for us for tomorrow. It'll still be short sleeve kind of weather as we round out our work week across this region. And you can see even as we get a little cooler Thursday into Friday in New York City, we're really just going to end up into those upper 60s. Not bad for this time of year. 90s on tap for Tallahassee by Saturday. 80s for Memphis both Thursday and Friday. And even Omaha, again, seeing a bit of a cool down where we go from the 70s, but just ending up into those upper 60s by Friday and Saturday. One treat, we do have a meteor shower that's going to peak tonight. The Lyrid meteor shower. Ooh, Savannah, I got your attention. Listen up, guys. Nice sky conditions for parts of the upper Midwest. We'll still see some partly cloudy skies, so not all that great. I mean, you're still going to have to look through some of these clouds, but out west, we'll see a couple of these clouds. Of course, the stormy and cloudy conditions are going to last across parts of the south, but really one of the better places to be is going to be Florida. Unfortunately, we'll still see some clouds in the sky across parts of the northeast, but I think you guys could get out there, maybe give it a whirl, see if you can see
What's
some
the timing?
meteors. Late tonight. I don't know if it's going to work for your early morning news schedule,
Probably
like mine.
But
And if I get up and give it a shot and lose sleep and it's cloudy,
yeah,
Going to be on the hook for that.
Yeah.
These clouds are continuously disappointing here. I just like to
agree.
lodge my complaints to you. but-
yeah.
Well, I'll take them.
Okay.
I always do.
All right, Angie,
you.
thanks so much.
You got it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.